Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. We're gonna continue forward with building this beaches website. I know it's been a couple weeks since we looked at it, so let's have a little bit of a recap, shall we? So what we have so far is just like a heading with beaches traveling. Our navigation bar is done. We have our little part right there that has like a little blurb about what we're about. And then a book now button with an image, and then we have an actual about us section with some lorem ipsum in there. And then if we go to that, it takes us to the about us page. And then we haven't done our book section yet. So what we're going to do is continue forward. We've got about 2 sections left. This is what the actual form is going to look like. So the form is going to be to the left, and then some more information is going to be on the right. I think it's good on a website to have information like the phone and email and other ways to contact or be a part of what it is, just so, you know, it seems more organic. So we're going to go with this approach. Yeah, so let's get started. All right, let's get this started. So we're going to start out with just having another div at the bottom of our About Us, just so we can kind of see where things are. Okay, so let's go to our HTML. Hopefully you've got your files pulled up. There is a There's a GitHub repo that has that I've been updating that has this stuff on here. I'll link it below. So if you want to, follow along, what have you, you can. I'm just going to start out by doing a div here. I'm going to have the class name to be book_vacay. And I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to head over to my style. I wanted to have, at this time, I wanted to have a border around it and the same margin top in between the last section and this one. So I'm just going to comma to add a new property here. And I'm just going to say, what do we say? book_vacay. Okay, and now when I go here and refresh, here is the new section that we just have, which is this div. Okay, let's give it a section so that we're able to refer to it by its ID. When we click on it, so it's going to be like the same as we did for our About site or our About button. When we click on it, we want it to go to that section of the page. So let's call this one book. And then when we go up here, we say hashtag, and then we're going to call it book. So remember, if we want to refer to it in our navigation, the way that we're doing it, I put an ID of book, and when I went back up here, I put hashtag. You refer to an ID as a hashtag, and then I just put the name of that ID, which is book. And then now when I refresh here, and I click book, I am in this book section now. So that's how that happened. The next thing that we want to do is shaping up. So what we want to do is do an H2 just so we know the name of this section. And we're just going to call it book now. And then I'm going to start with my form. So forms in HTML. Forms, I normally do like a label and an input. So let me just put the form tag. It's the same as the other tags. I'm just going to, I don't need the action because we're not going to do the actual functionality for it. But if you were, you would need an action and you would need a method. So at this point, I'm just going to have a form class, and I'm going to call it book form. Okay, and then I'm going to do a label. So let's do label. And again, if you just type in the word label, it should populate it for you. If not, it is just a left angle bracket label and then space, and then I put an attribute of 4 so we're able to identify what this label is for, and equals to a empty parentheses at this point. No, I'm sorry, an empty quotes, sorry. And then a right angle bracket, and then a closing label tag, okay? So in between this, I'm just gonna say first name, and then I'm gonna have a space there. A label is what you're gonna see on the form so we can identify what it is. So when I refresh, here we've got my book now. The label is gonna appear right before whatever it is that you want to put on there. So for me, I want an input. An input is where a user can add information. They can input information that was asked for. Okay, and at this point, it's just first name. We're just asking for their first name. So let's go ahead and type this out. Angle bracket, input, type. The type is text in this case because we're just taking in words. It's just letters. I want a space, and then we have a name. A name is used to identify what this input type is, right? So if we were submitting this form, we would need the name field in order to get that information on our back end to be able to send it to our email that we have, right? When we set that up. So I'm going to do first name, angle bracket. Okay. And let's see what this looks like. All right, so right now, all I have is a label. That's what the first name is, followed by a colon. That's all the label. And then the input, excuse me, is just this box right here. It's this text box. Whoops. So, I mean, you could put anything in here. Just an input box. Words will show up. Now, again, like I said, ours isn't going to function fully, but at least you'll have a form on your page. I'm going to make a first name. I have a first name. I'm going to do a last name. It's still input type text, but this time the name is last name. Notice how I'm doing last underscore name. Of course, you cannot do this when you're trying to do it, when you're naming things, just because it's not going to pick up that second word. A space means that you're done with this and you're moving on to the next one. I don't want it to be done with it, so I'm just going to underscore it. You could put it together and do camel case if you'd like. I personally just like to do underscore and then name, or underscore and then the word. So yeah, like all we're doing is email, begin vacay, end vacay, and then number of people. So, okay. So now I have email. So I'm going to say there's an actual type that's email. So you could say type email. This was just a text. This one will say it's looking for an email. Again, whenever you get to the part where you want to push this over to a server to be able to manipulate this information on the back end, then you want to make sure that you have this as an email. So when you're validating things on the back end, it's easier, right? It says, oh, well, I'm looking for type email. Okay. Now, name is going to be email as well. You could name it whatever you like. It doesn't have to be email, but type must be email if you want it to be an email in that field. Okay, I'm going to paste another one, and this one is going to be called begin vacay, and I just realized that I haven't been filling out my fours, so we'll go back and do that because none of them have it. So I have a label that says begin vacay. I'm going to give this one a type of date. And I'm going to change the name on this to start vacay. And now I'm going to copy this one because I want a beginning and an ending. And then I'm going to call it end vacay. It's still going to be a date. And instead of start, I want it to be end vacay. Okay, next thing we need is number of people. And this would be just like, of course, the number of people that's joining on the trip. And then I'm going to give this a type of number because we want it to be a value. We want it to be a number. We don't want it to be text. We don't want the user to be able to put text here. That's another reason for these type fields as well. So you can kind of usher, I mean, I guess you could say usher, but so you can kind of move the user to be using the things that you want them to be using, because sometimes people don't know how to use your website, and so it's another way to kind of usher people along so they know how they're supposed to be using your site. So we want them to have a number, and I just named it num_people. Now let's go back to these 4 tags, or to these 4 attributes. I'm just going to name it whatever my name is at this point. And then it's basically just a good identifier, right? You don't want to have a lot of label 4s and not have them filled in, just because it looks a lot better to read, a lot easier to read. And if somebody were coming in, it's just easier as a developer when somebody else is coming in and they might be looking at this, but it's good to have an identifier here. So it's right off the bat, we know what it's for. And I know you might think it's kind of redundant, but I think in the long run it's good practice to do. All right, now we have a form, or we should have a form. It's a form, right? So we've got our first name input, last name input, email. Now notice we said type email. It looks like an input form, but it just recognizes it as a type of email, right? Let's actually look up something. So if I were to do input type email, and don't be afraid to have to do things like this or kind of get validation for it, Yeah, so there's also a password, defines a password field. It makes it more just, right? So we're justifying that this is an email field, or we're justifying that it's a password field, or we're justifying exactly what it is, right? There's a number of things you could put here. There's a color, there's a date. So don't be afraid to go and look up kind of like what it is or what it means or those types of things, right? So this just says an email used to let the user enter and edit an email address, a list of email addresses. If it's multiples of them, it's automatically validated to ensure that it's either empty or properly formatted email or list of addresses before the form can be submitted. Yeah, so it definitely works for validation as well. Okay, so now you see we have a begin vacay and it has a date, right? A date just has this month, day, year format, okay? And it makes it a lot easier. This little arrow points to a calendar, so you could add your days here. And then, let me X that out. And then the same thing for this one. Number of people has a little number thing here, right? Which also works, right? Because you could put it as -1. Now, stuff like that can be handled when you do a validation, when you're validating your form. And I know I keep talking about that a lot, but we're not doing that. That's because I want you to have the bare basics of a website down. We could validate the form at a later date. So right now, this is what we've got, but we're missing a submit button. So let's go input, and this one is going to be type submit. And then the name of this is going to be, you guessed it, submit. The value, this one's something that we haven't seen. The value is what's going to display on this input. And for this, I want it to be submit. I'm going to give it an ID so I could better style it. Because if you notice, there's no class on here and there's no ID that comes with this, or that we have on here now. So let's identify just this button, okay, as submit btn. Let's save it and let's look at it. All right, so here we go. Here's our button, our input type button. or input type submit, sorry. And basically the value that we added was submit, right? You could add anything to the value. You could say click here if you wanted to, just to show you. And if you refresh, it changes the text to click here. So yeah, you could call it whatever you like, make it say whatever you like, but I'm going to leave mine as submit just for easier purposes. Now we have our form, but it's looking a little weird, right? The form is not really what do you call it? It's not formatted as we would hoped it would be. It's kind of just, it doesn't look like this for sure. So this is what we're trying to get to. On to our style. So all we have so far is we have the section in green. We gave it a height and we gave it a margin top. And that was just the same styling as about site. So we're probably going to have to edit ours just to make it look, you know, specifically for ours. So it's okay. You can use the book vacay again, that class, and give it new style. And this would override the style from before it. Okay, so I'm going to override the height. And I want it a little bit bigger because this section's a little bit more stuff. And then I'm going to have a width of 425 pixels on here. And refresh this. Okay, cool. So now we, what we did was we said, hey, I'm going to give it a higher height and a width that's a little bit smaller, and it doesn't take up the whole page because if you remember, we want our sections side by side. So we want to kind of minimize the width of these two so they could fit on the same page, or on the same row, excuse me. So with that being said, let's get to our form. Oh, before we get to our form, just remembered, let us do display inline block. Now, if you'll notice, it's not going to do much now. And in fact, it might be best to comment it out until we actually need it, so y'all could kind of see what that does visually. So let's go to our form. And for our form, I just typed in the word form, but I think, yep, I have a class called book form. So let's use the class name. I gave it a class name. Let's use it. Book form. Dot book form. Okay. And I'm going to give this a width. This one's going to be 320 pixels. And I'm going to have it margin left, auto, margin right, auto. Now, if you recall, when you give it a width and you say margin left and margin right auto, it should center it. And it does. So now all of our things, they're still in this yucky format, but at least they are in the center of the yucky formatting. So we'll fix that. So the next thing we want to do, and if you notice I'm tabbing in because we're still going to be a part of the form, just make it a little bit easier to read. So now we have a label, and these are all of our labels, and we want those labels to be displayed block. So we want them on one line. So let's see. Okay, cool. Now we have a label. All of our labels they take up one whole row or one line. Okay. Now, after I do that, for the label, I want to adjust the font size. I want a little bit bigger font because we've got the space. I'd like to be able to read it. So 13-point font. And I'm going to bold that up. Font weight. Font weight is how you bold things, if you recall. And then we're also going to deal with the color of the label, which is the text. And I'm going to use hashtag FFF. Let's refresh. So FFF is white. So it just changed it to white. And that's also something that we used up here for the Book Now button as well. So then we're going to adjust the margin top because they're all smushed together, right? Let's give them some space. Let them breathe. Pixels, refresh. There we go. Now we've got some space at the top of each one of these labels. It looks pretty good. It's starting to shape up. So the next thing we want is the inputs, right? These inputs here, if you notice, they're all input, 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 input. So we're all going, when I say input, it's going to target all of the inputs. So if I do input, and this is where I want to change the width of it, change the height of it, put that border radius around it that I had in my other one, change the colors, and give it some margin top, and just generally make it look a little bit easier to see, you know, make it stand out and clean it up a bit. So the width is 300 pixels. The height is 20 pixels. I'll do a border radius. And if you're wondering how I come up with these numbers so quickly, it's not because I'm a super genius. It's because I played around with the numbers on my own, and then, you know, I put them on here. But it's important for you to realize that I didn't just come up with these out of the yin-ya and everything worked perfectly the first time. It took a lot of adjusting. So don't be ashamed or like afraid or worried if you've got to spend a lot of time trying to get the outcome that you want for this. It takes a lot of messing around with, trust me. It's all a part of the job. So 1 pixel for the border. We're going to have it solid, and we're going to make it white again. I'm not a designer, but I'm trying to make this look a little bit clean and a little bit like, you know, give it that feel of booking a vacation and stuff. So before I go too much further, let's look and see what we got. Nice! Awesome. Okay, so as you can see, in our input, we've got a width of 300 pixels, which really widened that out. The height as well is 20 pixels now. The border radius, look at those. They changed to 10 pixels. If you don't like this, make it the way you want it. I mean, I'm not going to be mad if you do so. Just switch it up the way that you like it. And then I added a border, that white border around it. So let me take that off. Let's see what it looked like before. So before it had that kind of indentation here. If you could see, it kind of looks gray around it. That's just the input, right? I have no control over that. But what I can do is add this border to it and make it look a little bit more solid, a little bit more uniform, make it flow a little bit better. So now I'm going to do my margin top. And this is the last thing here. And I'm going to, that gives it some space at the top of each of these inputs. So right here, right here, right here, and so on and so forth. So it's not as scrunched up and it's more readable. The next thing is the submit button. BTN. And if you recall, we gave it an ID of submit button. That's where I'm getting that from. And I'm going to say margin left, because if you look at our submit button now, here, let me finish. Margin left, 115 pixels. So if you look at our submit button now, it's as wide as all the other inputs because I told it to do that when I did the input. If you recall, the submit is actually an input as well. So it's doing what I told it to do, but now I want to adjust it. So I'm calling it by its ID so that I can further adjust it and make it the way that I want it to be. Margin top, 20 pixels. Border radius. And then I'm doing this one a little bit less of a border radius, so 4 pixels. And then I'm giving it a width of 80. You could certainly, like I said, use percentages if you're more comfortable with percentages. I tend to go back and forth with them depending on what I'm doing, really, if I want to use it. I started using pixels when I did this website, and then I just continue to do so. So, I mean, you could do whatever you would like. So let's refresh. Now our submit button. Let's look. Our submit button is now has a margin left of 115 pixels, so it scooched over some. It has a top margin of 20 pixels and a border radius here of 4 pixels. And then, of course, the width now is 80 pixels. And if we wanted to, which we should have been doing, if you're going to go and do this on your own and adjust the sizes, you'll need this open. So we scroll down, and we can select what element we want to with that right here. Select an element on the page here, and then just go to it and click on it, and it'll take us right to it. And then we have a border, and it tells us what the margin is. So the left side of this margin right here is 115, 20 at the top, just like we told it to be, and there's nothing at the right or the bottom. I don't really need it. You could put a 0 there, but it's not necessary. So yeah, so this is what my button looks like, and I'm going to continue forward. So if you remember, we had a another section over here that was like kind of like human interaction if you wanted it to. Let's add that now. So let's go back to our HTML, and inside of our book vacay, because we want it in the same area. No, that's not true. We want 2 different ones here. Let's see. Let's just try it. Div, let's give this one a class contact underscore us. Let's do the section. Give it an ID. Oops. Section. Give it an ID of contact. Which, if we scroll back up, for me it's line 16, I could say contact. And again, that's referring to this ID of contact. And if I go back to my style and I add in here dot contact us, I think that's what it's called. Yes, contact us. Let's see. All right, so it gives me another div. This is my contact us div. If we wanted to make sure, let's do that. Yep, it's our contact us div. Okay, we haven't given it any styling, so that's why it's on its own row. Divs automatically are block elements, which means they're going to take up a block or a whole row of your page. So let's go and add some information in here. I'm going to go with an H2 that just asks need to speak to a human. Again, you can make this any way that you like, any way that you see this. I'm going to start putting contact information, and I just made up a number, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. If you were doing this for an actual client, then of course you want to put the actual information, but we're just kind of, you know, working on this, so just whatever you like to do. beachesvacay.com, and again, this is a made-up email address. And then I also have another H2 with contact us. All right, so let's refresh. What we have here is just our text, right? All this text is now on the page, which it's good to see it. So if you notice, these H2 tags are automatically centered. That's because In our CSS, way up here, we said, hey, all the H2 tags, just center them. So it's going to center all of them now. So that's all that's doing. So let's style our contact us section. So we already have it up here. Okay. Let's add a new section, contact us. And let's give it a width. Same as the other one. So we're going to do 425 pixels, excuse me. And then we're going to do margin left again, remember, and then margin right, auto. So again, remember, if you want to center something, give it a width and give it margin left, margin right, auto. And I'm going to give it margin top 80 pixels. So it won't be too close to the top of this one. And this section is a little bit smaller too, so that's another reason why. And then I'm going to float it to the right. So let's refresh, and if you see, these are definitely not, you see it's definitely smaller here. If we take a look and we compare it, here's that section right here. Okay, and then we're here and you're like, what? It's not up here in this section where we want it to be. And it may not be that way because, let's see. Oh, remember when I said display inline block and I took it out? That's what we need. So I'm going to add contact us to this section so I could display inline block with both of them. And nothing's going to happen. Here we go. So now this is displayed in line. And if I wanted to go back, I have H4s up here. So I'm just going to go back up here and add H4 so it's text align center. And there's that. So yeah, so this one's a little bit shorter in height, and it's a little bit wider in width as well because there's just more words here. You can adjust it so the form has more width if you'd like. That's also an option. Like I said, anything you want to do. So it looks similar, except the color of the words, and the background of the input form, which I forgot to do. So scroll back down, and if you notice the input form, you can do a background color here. And this is the one that I'm using for myself, #07. And then I refresh, and then there's that color that we have over here on this page. Looks nice. The only other thing I could say is that these words are blue, and that's the same blue I used for my button and my nav. So let me go back up here. And I only want the H4s to have that color. So I'm going to go H4. And then I'm going to find that color from my nav, which is here. And I'm going to say color and paste that in. And I'll refresh. And now these are blue. What else? Oh, these are also changed. 2 different numbers. 0770. Okay, that should work. There we go. Now those are the right colors. Now another thing we could do is take the borders off of these. This is the border for all of my div classes here. So there we go. So now that's what we have. Looks pretty, like a decent form. Again, all of this can be adjusted. All of it can be customized. It's not just this is it, and that's how it has to be. So yeah, that's our form in our human section. So yeah, I hope that this was helpful. Hope that you learned some things, and hope that you're able to follow along and learn more about some properties and values and things like that. I'm going to end the video here, and the final video will be of the footer. So I'll see you there. Thanks for watching. Bye.